My name is Rebecca Martinez, and 3 months ago, I discovered that my sister Vanessa had been hiding the most important letter I would ever receive. The letter that would change everything I thought I knew about my family, my father, and myself. But let me start from the beginning, because this story, it's about more than just a hidden letter. It's about betrayal, forgiveness, and the complicated love that exists between sisters. It was a cold February morning in Denver when my phone rang at 6:30 a.m. I was already awake, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching the snow fall outside my apartment window. The caller ID showed my stepmother's name, Patricia Henley Martinez. "Rebecca?" Patricia's voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. "Your father, he passed away last night." The coffee cup slipped from my hands, shattering on the hardwood floor. Hot liquid splashed across my bare feet, but I barely felt it. Dad was gone. At 68, Miguel Angel Martinez had suffered a massive heart attack in his sleep. The man who had taught me how to ride a bike, who had walked me down the aisle at my wedding, who had called me every Sunday without fail for the past 15 years, was gone. "I'll be there in an hour," I managed to say, my voice cracking. The drive to my childhood home in Lakewood felt like a blur. The familiar streets looked different somehow, as if losing Dad had changed the very landscape of my world. When I pulled into the driveway of the modest 2-story house where I had grown up, I saw Vanessa's silver BMW already parked there. My older sister had beaten me there, as she always did. Vanessa was the successful one, the lawyer who lived in Cherry Creek and drove expensive cars. I was just a middle school teacher who lived paycheck to paycheck. Patricia met me at the door, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She was only 55, 10 years younger than Dad, and they had been married for 8 years. She was a good woman, and Dad had been happy with her, but she would never be my mother. My real mother, Carmen, had died when I was 12 and Vanessa was 16. Patricia understood this and never tried to replace her. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "The funeral home came this morning," Patricia said, wrapping her arms around me. "Vanessa is in his office going through his papers." I found my sister sitting behind Dad's old oak desk, surrounded by file folders and documents. At 39, Vanessa was still beautiful, with the same dark hair and brown eyes we had inherited from our mother. But there was a hardness to her now that hadn't been there when we were younger. Success had changed her, made her calculating in ways that sometimes frightened me. "Rebecca," she said without looking up from the papers, "we need to talk about the arrangements. Dad left very specific instructions. Can we just sit with this for a moment?" I said, sinking into the leather chair across from the desk. "He's been gone for less than 12 hours. Vanessa finally looked up at me, and for a brief moment I saw the grief in her eyes. But she quickly masked it with her lawyer face, the expression she wore in courtrooms and business meetings. "We don't have time to sit with it," she said curtly. "There are decisions to make, people to notify. Dad wouldn't want us falling apart." She was right, of course. Dad had always been practical, organized. He would have wanted us to handle his death the same way he had handled his life, efficiently and without unnecessary drama. But I wasn't ready to be efficient. I wanted to scream, to cry, to rage against the unfairness of losing the most important person in my life. "What kind of instructions?" I asked. Vanessa pulled out a manila folder. He planned everything. The funeral home, the service, even the music he wanted played. And Rebecca, she paused, her voice softening slightly. He wrote letters, for both of us. My heart skipped a beat. Letters? Final letters. You know how Dad was with his words. He probably spent months writing them. Vanessa reached into the folder and pulled out a cream-colored envelope with my name written in Dad's careful handwriting. "Here's yours." I took the envelope with trembling hands. It felt heavier than it should have, weighted with all the words my father had wanted to say to me one last time. But as I looked at it more closely, something seemed wrong. "Vanessa," I said slowly, "this envelope, it's been opened." My sister's face went pale. "What do you mean? Look at the seal." It's been opened and resealed. You can see where the glue doesn't quite match up. I held the envelope up to the light streaming through Dad's office window. Did you read my letter? Of course not, Vanessa said, but her voice was too quick, too defensive. Why would I do that? I stared at my sister, searching her face for the truth. We had always been close, despite our differences. She was the one I had called when my marriage fell apart 2 years ago. She was the one who had helped me move into my apartment, who had co-signed my car loan when my credit wasn't good enough. But something in her expression now made me doubt everything I thought I knew about her. You did read it, I said quietly. Why? Vanessa stood up abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked Dad's carefully maintained garden. Even in winter, you could see the love he had put into every flower bed, every carefully pruned shrub. I was protecting you, she said finally. Protecting me from what? She turned around, and I saw tears in her eyes for the first time since I had arrived. From the truth, Rebecca. From knowing how Dad really felt about the choices you've made. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Your divorce? Your job? The way you've been living your life? Dad was disappointed, Rebecca. Really disappointed. I thought maybe you didn't need to know that. Not now. The words hit me like a physical blow. Dad, disappointed in me. It couldn't be true. We had talked every week, and he had always been supportive, always encouraging. When David and I divorced, Dad had been the one to tell me I deserved better. When I had struggled to find a teaching job, he had been my biggest cheerleader. I don't believe you, I said, but my voice wavered. Vanessa sat back down, her expression softening. I'm sorry, Becca. I really am. I just thought, what's the point of hurting you now? He's gone. The letter can't change anything. But as I looked at my sister, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. The envelope in my hands wasn't just opened and resealed. There were pages missing. I could feel it in the weight, see it in the way the remaining papers sat inside. This isn't the complete letter, I said slowly. You didn't just read it. You took parts of it out. Vanessa's mask slipped completely then, and I saw something I had never seen in my sister's face before. Guilt mixed with something that looked almost like fear. Rebecca, please, just let it go. No. I stood up, clutching the incomplete letter to my chest. I want to know what Dad really wrote to me. All of it. The next hour was one of the most painful of my life. Through tears and arguments, through Patricia trying to mediate and neighbors stopping by with casseroles and condolences, I finally got the truth out of Vanessa. She had read both letters the night before, when Patricia had given them to her to hold until I arrived, and what she had found in mine had made her decide to edit it. He left you the house, Rebecca, she finally admitted. Not Patricia, not me. You, along with most of his savings and his investment accounts. I'm getting some family jewelry and his car, but you're getting almost everything. I stared at her in shock. That's why you hid parts of the letter? Because of money? It's not about the money, Vanessa exploded. It's about fairness. I'm the one who went to law school, who built a career, who made something of myself. You're a teacher who can barely pay her rent, and Dad is rewarding you for that. The hurt in her voice was real, but it didn't excuse what she had done. So you decided to hide his final words to me because you didn't like what they said. I was going to tell you about the inheritance eventually, she said quietly. But the letter, Rebecca, he wrote things about me too. Things that would hurt our relationship forever. What kind of things? Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. He said he was proud of your compassion, your ability to put others before yourself. And he said he worried that success had made me cold, that I had forgotten what really mattered in life. The room fell silent except for the ticking of Dad's old grandfather clock in the corner. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and for the first time, I understood something that had been building between us for years. Vanessa had always felt like she had to prove herself, had to be perfect to earn Dad's love. But Dad had never required perfection from me. He had loved me exactly as I was. Where are the missing pages? I asked quietly. Vanessa walked to the desk and pulled out several folded sheets of paper from the same cream stationery. Here, but Rebecca, please think carefully before you read them. Some things, once you know them, you can't unknow. I took the pages, my hands shaking. I need to know what Dad wanted to tell me. All of it. As I unfolded the papers, I could see Dad's handwriting, the same careful script that had written my name on birthday cards and signed permission slips throughout my childhood. And as I began to read, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my father's final wishes was about to change. But that's not where this story ends. In fact, it's where it truly begins. Because what I discovered in those hidden pages would lead to a confrontation at Dad's will, reading that would change my relationship with Vanessa forever, and teach me something profound about love, forgiveness, and the complicated bonds that tie families together. Reading Dad's complete letter was like having a conversation with him one last time. His voice came through in every carefully chosen word, and I could almost hear him speaking as I read. The pages Vanessa had hidden contained the most beautiful and heartbreaking words my father had ever written to me. "My dearest Rebecca," the complete letter began. "If you are reading this, then I am no longer with you, and I hope these words will serve as a bridge between us until we meet again. I want you to know that of all the things I have accomplished in my life, being your father has been my greatest privilege and my deepest joy." Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. Dad wrote about specific memories, teaching me to drive in the empty parking lot behind the grocery store, staying up all night with me when I had pneumonia at age 8, walking me down the aisle at my wedding even though he had reservations about David from the beginning. "You have always had the biggest heart of anyone I know," he wrote. "When you chose to become a teacher, I was so proud I could hardly contain myself. Not because teaching is a noble profession, though it is, but because you chose it for the right reasons. You wanted to make a difference in children's lives. You wanted to be the kind of teacher who sees potential in every student, who never gives up on anyone. That is who you are, mija. That is why I love you so much." But it was the next section that made me understand why Vanessa had been so afraid to let me read it. "I know your sister thinks I am being unfair in how I have divided my estate. Vanessa has always been driven by a need to succeed, to prove herself worthy of love. But what she has never understood is that love is not something that must be earned. It is freely given without conditions or requirements. You have never needed to prove anything to me, Rebecca. You have always simply been enough, exactly as you are." Dad went on to explain his reasoning for leaving me the house and the majority of his assets. It wasn't because he loved me more than Vanessa, but because he knew I would need the security more than she would. Vanessa had built a successful law practice and married well. Her husband Richard was a prominent surgeon, and they lived in a $1 million home in one of Denver's most exclusive neighborhoods. I, on the other hand, was a divorced teacher living in a small apartment, struggling to make ends meet on my modest salary. "I worry about Vanessa," Dad continued. "Success has brought her many things, but I fear it has also built walls around her heart. She has forgotten how to be vulnerable, how to accept help from others. She sees kindness as weakness and compassion as foolishness. I hope that someday she will remember the little girl who used to bring me flowers from the garden and tell me elaborate stories about fairy kingdoms. That little girl is still inside her somewhere, buried under years of trying to be perfect." The letter concluded with Dad's hopes for both of us, that Vanessa would find her way back to the warmth and openness she had possessed as a child, and that I would continue to share my gift of empathy with the world, despite the disappointments and heartbreaks life had brought me. "Take care of each other," were his final words. "You are sisters, and that bond is sacred. Do not let pride or hurt feelings destroy what your mother and I tried to build in our family. Love each other fiercely, forgive each other completely, and remember that you are both part of me, carrying forward the best of what I tried to be." When I finished reading, I looked up to find both Vanessa and Patricia watching me with anxious expressions. The winter afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across Dad's office. "Now you know," Vanessa said quietly. "Now you understand why I didn't want you to read it." I folded the letter carefully, holding it against my chest. You were wrong to hide this from me. Was I? Look at how you're looking at me now, Rebecca. Like I'm a stranger. Like I'm someone you can't trust. She wasn't entirely wrong. Learning that she had not only read my private letter but had also edited it to suit her own purposes had shaken something fundamental in our relationship. But as I sat there in Dad's office, surrounded by the books he had loved and the photographs of our family, I began to understand something else. You're hurt, I said. You're hurt because Dad saw through the person you've become to the person you used to be, and you don't like what he saw. Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. He made me sound like some kind of monster, like success had corrupted me or something. Has it? The question hung in the air between us. Patricia excused herself quietly, leaving us alone to work through whatever was happening between us. I worked so hard, Vanessa said, her voice barely above a whisper. After Mom died, I felt like I had to be perfect. I had to make Dad proud, had to prove that her death hadn't destroyed our family. I studied harder than anyone else in law school. I worked 18-hour days as an associate. I built a practice that employs 12 people and has a reputation throughout Colorado. And for what? So Dad could write in his final letter that he's worried I've lost my humanity? I stood up and walked around the desk to where she was sitting. He also wrote that he loves you, that he's proud of you, that he hopes you'll find your way back to who you used to be. But he left you everything, Rebecca. The house, the money, everything that really mattered to him. He left you something too, I said, thinking about the letter I had just read. He left you the truth about who you are and who you could be again. That's worth more than any house or bank account. Vanessa looked up at me with tears in her eyes. How can you be so understanding? I've violated your privacy. I kept Dad's final words from you. You should hate me. I'm angry, I admitted. I'm angrier than I've ever been in my life, but I don't hate you. You're my sister. Dad's last words were for us to take care of each other. Over the next few days, as we planned Dad's funeral and dealt with the endless details that death requires, Vanessa and I found ourselves in a strange place. We were polite to each other, functional, but there was a distance between us that hadn't been there before. She helped me arrange for the flowers Dad had requested, and I helped her write his obituary for the newspaper. But we were like actors playing the roles of sisters rather than actually being sisters. The funeral was held on a snowy Thursday morning at St. Catherine's Catholic Church, where our family had attended Mass for over 20 years. The church was packed with Dad's friends from work, neighbors, former students from his years as a high school math teacher before he moved into administration, and what seemed like half the faculty from Jefferson Middle School, where I taught. Father Martinez, who was no relation despite sharing our last name, delivered a beautiful homily about Dad's life and his commitment to education and family. Several of Dad's colleagues spoke about his dedication to his students and his innovative approaches to curriculum development. Vanessa gave an eloquent eulogy about Dad's love for our mother and his devotion to keeping our family together after her death. When it was my turn to speak, I had planned to talk about Dad's sense of humor and his weekend projects around the house. But standing at the podium, looking out at all the people whose lives Dad had touched, I found myself thinking about the letter hidden in my purse and the complicated love that exists within families. My father believed in second chances, I said, departing from my prepared remarks. He believed that everyone deserves to be forgiven, to start over, to become better than they were yesterday. He taught my sister and me that love isn't something you earn through perfect behavior or impressive achievements. Love is something you give freely, without conditions, because that's what families do for each other. I caught Vanessa's eye in the front pew. She was crying openly now, not caring about her perfect makeup or her professional image. Dad would want us to remember that families are complicated, I continued. We hurt each other sometimes. We make mistakes. We let pride and fear get in the way of love. But if we're lucky, we also get the chance to forgive each other and try again. That's what he would want for all of us. That's what he would want for me and my sister. After the service, we buried Dad in Mountain View Cemetery next to our mother. As we stood around the gravesite, I felt the weight of his final letter in my coat pocket. But I also felt something else, a tentative hope that maybe Vanessa and I could find our way back to each other. The will reading was scheduled for the following Monday at the offices of Dad's attorney, Harold Westbrook. Vanessa arrived in her power suit and briefcase, ready for business as usual. Patricia wore a simple black dress, still clearly struggling with her grief. I came in my best teaching clothes, a navy blue blazer and skirt that I usually reserved for parent conferences and school board meetings. Mr. Westbrook was a kind man in his 70s who had handled Dad's legal affairs for over a decade. He expressed his condolences and then got down to business, reading through the formal language of Dad's will. Everything was exactly as the letter had indicated. I inherited the house, the savings accounts, and Dad's investment portfolio. Vanessa received our mother's jewelry, Dad's car, and a smaller but still substantial sum of money. Patricia was left enough to live comfortably for the rest of her life. But then Mr. Westbrook said something that surprised all of us. "There is one additional item," he said, consulting his notes. "Mr. Martinez left specific instructions that if certain conditions were met, I was to read aloud a final letter to all beneficiaries present." "What conditions?" Vanessa asked sharply. "That the primary beneficiary had read and understood his personal letter to her, and that she felt ready to share his final thoughts with the family." All eyes turned to me. I looked at Vanessa, who had gone pale, then at Patricia, who seemed confused by this unexpected development. "I understand what he's asking," I said quietly. "And yes, I'm ready." What happened next would change everything between my sister and me, and teach me something profound about the power of truth, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds that hold families together, even when they seem stretched to the breaking point. Mr. Westbrook reached into his file and pulled out another sealed envelope, this one addressed simply to my family. As he carefully opened it, I felt my heart racing. What other surprises had Dad planned for us? "This letter is dated the same day as your individual letters," Mr. Westbrook explained. "Mr. Martinez gave me very specific instructions about when and how to read it." He unfolded several pages of Dad's familiar handwriting and cleared his throat. "My dear family," he began, reading in Dad's voice but through his own words, "if Harold is reading this to you, it means that Rebecca has received and read her complete letter, and that all of you are together to hear my final words to our family as a whole." I glanced at Vanessa, whose face had gone completely white. She knew, as I was beginning to suspect, that Dad had planned for this moment. He had known that his individual letters might cause problems between us, and he had prepared accordingly. Mr. Westbrook continued reading. "I want to talk to you about love and about the different ways it shows itself in families. I loved your mother, Carmen, with the kind of passionate, consuming love that poets write about. When she died, I thought that part of my life was over forever. But then Patricia came into our lives, and I learned that the heart is capable of more than one kind of love. Patricia, you brought me peace and companionship and a different kind of happiness. You helped me become a better father to my daughters by showing me that it was okay to love again." Patricia was crying quietly, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. This public acknowledgement of Dad's love for her clearly meant everything to her. "But the love I have for my daughters is something else entirely," Dad's letter continued. "It is fierce and protective and unconditional. It is the kind of love that sees potential even when others see failure, that offers comfort even when it isn't asked for, that forgives even when forgiveness seems impossible." Mr. Westbrook paused to take a sip of water, then continued. "Vanessa, my ambitious daughter, I know you think I have been unfair in how I divided my estate. You see Rebecca getting the house and the money, and you believe it means I love her more. But you are wrong about that. I am giving Rebecca these things because she needs them and because I know she will use them wisely. But I am giving you something far more valuable. I am giving you the chance to choose who you want to be." Vanessa was staring straight ahead, her jaw clenched, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "You have built an impressive life, Mija. You are successful and independent and strong. But somewhere along the way, You forgot that strength doesn't require hardness, that success doesn't require stepping on others, that independence doesn't require isolation. The little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them roses is still inside you. The teenager who stayed up all night helping Rebecca study for her algebra final is still there. The young woman who held my hand at your mother's funeral and promised we would take care of each other is still part of who you are. I watched my sister's carefully constructed composure begin to crack. Tears were forming in her eyes, though she was fighting hard to keep them from falling. I divided my estate the way I did because I wanted to give each of you what you need most. Rebecca needs financial security. Patricia needs to know that she was truly part of our family. But you, Vanessa, you need to remember that love is not a competition. You need to learn that being vulnerable doesn't make you weak, and that asking for help doesn't make you a failure. Mr. Westbrook turned the page and continued. I know that reading this together might be difficult. There may be hurt feelings and misunderstandings. Rebecca may be angry that Vanessa read her letter first. Vanessa may be resentful about the inheritance. Patricia may feel caught in the middle of her stepdaughter's conflict. All three of us shifted uncomfortably in our chairs. Dad had predicted our reactions with uncomfortable accuracy. But here is what I want you to remember. You are family. You are connected by bonds that are stronger than money, stronger than hurt feelings, stronger than pride. Carmen and I tried to raise our daughters to love each other, to support each other, to be there for each other no matter what life brought. Patricia, you became part of that family the day you agreed to marry me. You are not just my widow, you are Vanessa and Rebecca's stepmother, and I hope you will continue to be part of their lives long after I am gone. The attorney paused again, looking at each of us in turn. There's more, he said gently. Rebecca, I know you have a forgiving heart. I know you will want to make peace with your sister and move forward. But I also know you well enough to know that you are probably angrier than you have ever been in your life. Vanessa violated your trust. She made decisions about your life without consulting you. She treated you like a child who couldn't handle the truth. Your anger is justified, Mija, but I hope you will not let it consume you. I felt tears starting to fall down my cheeks. Dad had known exactly how I would feel, exactly what I would struggle with. And Vanessa, I know you are sitting there feeling defensive and misunderstood. You are probably telling yourself that you were protecting Rebecca, that you were being practical, that you were doing what needed to be done. But deep down, you know the truth. You were protecting yourself. You were afraid that if Rebecca knew how disappointed I was in some of your choices, it would change how she sees you. You were afraid that if she knew about the inheritance, she would think less of your success. You were afraid, Mija, and fear makes us do things we later regret. Vanessa was crying openly now, no longer trying to maintain her professional composure. So here is what I want you to do. Dad's letter continued through Mr. Westbrook's steady voice. I want you to talk to each other, really talk. Not the polite surface-level conversations you've been having for the past few years, but the kind of deep, honest conversations you used to have when you were younger. Tell each other your fears, your dreams, your disappointments. Ask for forgiveness when you need it. Offer forgiveness when it's needed. Be sisters again, not just in name but in spirit. The lawyer turned to the final page. I have one last request. I want Rebecca to read her complete letter aloud to Vanessa and Patricia. Not because Vanessa doesn't deserve privacy, but because I want all of you to understand how much I love each of you and why I made the decisions I made. I want there to be no secrets between you, no hidden resentments, no unspoken hurts. My hands were shaking as I reached into my purse and pulled out Dad's letter to me. The pages that Vanessa had hidden were now carefully inserted back in their proper places, creating the complete message Dad had intended me to receive. Rebecca, Mr. Westbrook said gently, "Are you willing to honor your father's request?" I looked at Vanessa, who was staring at me with a mixture of fear and hope in her eyes. I looked at Patricia, who nodded encouragingly. Then I thought about Dad and his belief in second chances. his faith in the power of love to overcome hurt and disappointment. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think it's time we all heard what Dad really wanted to say." As I began to read Dad's letter aloud, I watched Vanessa's face transform. When I reached the part about Dad being proud of my compassion and my choice to become a teacher, she smiled through her tears. When I read his concerns about her becoming cold and calculating, she nodded as if she had been waiting years for someone to say those words out loud. But it was the final paragraph that broke down the last walls between us. "Take care of each other. You are sisters, and that bond is sacred. Do not let pride or hurt feelings destroy what your mother and I tried to build in our family. Love each other fiercely, forgive each other completely, and remember that you are both part of me, carrying forward the best of what I tried to be." When I finished reading, the office was completely silent, except for the sound of our crying. Mr. Westbrook quietly excused himself, leaving the three of us alone with Dad's words and our own complicated emotions. "I'm sorry," Vanessa said finally, her voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry, Rebecca. Dad was right about everything. I was scared and defensive, and I made terrible choices. I violated your privacy and your trust because I was afraid of losing you, and instead I almost lost you anyway." I set the letter down on the conference table and looked at my sister. Really looked at her. For the first time in years, I didn't see the successful lawyer, or the perfect wife, or the woman who seemed to have everything figured out. I saw the scared little girl who had tried to hold our family together after Mom died, who had worked so hard to make Dad proud that she had forgotten how to just be herself. "I forgive you," I said, and I meant it. "But Vanessa, we have to promise each other that we'll never let things get this complicated between us again. We have to promise to be honest, even when it's hard." She nodded eagerly. "I promise. And Rebecca, I want you to know that Dad was right about you too. You do have the biggest heart of anyone I know. You always have. I've been jealous of that for years, but I've also been proud of it. Proud to be your sister." Patricia, who had been quietly observing our reconciliation, spoke up for the first time. "Your father would be so happy right now. This is exactly what he hoped would happen." As we left the lawyer's office that day, I felt like something fundamental had shifted in our family. The hurt and mistrust were still there, but they were balanced now by understanding and forgiveness. Dad had orchestrated this moment from beyond the grave, using his final letters to force us to confront our problems and find our way back to each other. But the real test of our renewed sisterhood was still to come, because inheriting Dad's house and his money was going to bring new challenges and new opportunities for conflict. The question was whether we had learned enough from his final lesson to handle whatever came next. 3 weeks after the will reading, I stood in the kitchen of my childhood home, surrounded by boxes and memories. The February snow had finally stopped, and weak afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows where Mom's herb garden used to thrive. I was trying to decide what to keep, what to donate, and what to throw away when I heard Vanessa's car in the driveway. She had been coming by every few days since Dad's funeral, helping me sort through decades of accumulated belongings. It was slow work, made more difficult by the fact that every item seemed to hold a memory. Dad's collection of math textbooks from his teaching days, Mom's recipe box with her handwritten notes on index cards, photo albums full of family vacations and school events and ordinary moments that had seemed unremarkable at the time, but now felt precious beyond measure. "How are you holding up?" Vanessa asked as she came through the back door, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the Starbucks down the street. "I found Mom's wedding dress this morning," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. It was in the back of Dad's closet, wrapped in tissue paper and stored in a cedar chest I didn't even know existed. Vanessa sat down at the kitchen table where we had eaten thousands of meals as children. "What are you going to do with it?" "I don't know. It's not like I'll ever wear it again. And you're already married." I paused, thinking about the delicate lace and beadwork that had looked so beautiful on Mom in the wedding photos. Maybe save it for someday, in case one of us has a daughter who wants it. Or we could donate it to one of those organizations that provides wedding dresses to military brides or women who can't afford them, Vanessa suggested. Mom would like that. She always believed in helping people who needed it. It was a perfect suggestion, exactly the kind of thoughtful gesture the old Vanessa would have made before success had hardened her edges. I was seeing glimpses of that person more and more often lately. That's a beautiful idea, I said. Mom would love knowing her dress was making another bride happy. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, Vanessa tackling Dad's home office while I dealt with the kitchen. I was wrapping Mom's good china in newspaper when Vanessa called my name from the other room. Rebecca, you need to see this. I found her sitting at Dad's desk, holding a thick manila folder. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking slightly. What is it? I asked. It's records, financial records, about the house, about Dad's investments, about everything he left you. She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Rebecca, did you know that Dad remortgaged this house 2 years ago? My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Vanessa spread the papers out on the desk. He took out a second mortgage, a big one. And look at these bank statements. He was making monthly payments that were way larger than his teacher's pension should have been able to cover. I sat down heavily in the chair across from the desk. Why would he do that? I think... Vanessa paused, sorting through more documents. I think he was helping people. Look at these canceled checks. $500 to the Gonzalez family every month for the past year. $1,000 to someone named Jennifer Walsh. Regular payments to at least 6 different families. As we pieced together the paper trail, a picture began to emerge of Dad's final years that neither of us had suspected. He had been quietly using his savings and borrowing against the house to help former students and their families who had fallen on hard times. Jennifer Walsh was a single mother whose son had been in Dad's algebra class 15 years ago. She was struggling to pay for her cancer treatments. The Gonzalez family had lost their home in a fire and were living in a cramped apartment while trying to rebuild their lives. There are so many, I whispered, looking at check after check made out to people whose names I didn't recognize, but whose stories I could imagine. He was helping all these families, and he never told us. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, studying a bank statement. Rebecca, there's something else. The second mortgage. It's not paid off. You're inheriting the house, but you're also inheriting the debt. About $80,000 worth. The room felt like it was spinning. I had been planning to move into the house, to finally have a place of my own that I could afford on a teacher's salary. But $80,000 in debt changed everything. I can't afford those payments, I said numbly. Not on what I make. I know. Vanessa set down the papers and looked at me with an expression that was part guilt, part determination. But I can't. What do you mean? I mean we figure this out together. You and me. The way Dad would have wanted. She stood up and began pacing around the small office. Look, I've been thinking about everything that's happened since Dad died. About his letters, about the way he divided his estate, about what he really wanted for us. I waited for her to continue, not sure where she was going with this. He gave you the house and the money because he knew you would need them. But he also knew that taking care of this house, maintaining it, paying for repairs and upkeep, that was going to be more than you could handle alone. And he gave me less money because he knew I didn't need it. But maybe he also knew that I would need a reason to stay connected to you, to this family, to the person I used to be. Vanessa, I don't understand. She stopped pacing and turned to face me. I want to help you keep the house. I want to help you continue what Dad was doing for these families. I want to be part of something meaningful again, instead of just accumulating more money and success that doesn't really matter. I stared at my sister, trying to process what she was saying. You want to pay off Dad's debt. I want to do more than that. I want us to create something together. A foundation maybe, or a scholarship fund. Something that honors what Dad believed in. Education, helping people, giving second chances. Her voice was getting stronger, more confident. I have the money, Rebecca, more than I know what to do with. But you have something I lost somewhere along the way. You have heart. You have the ability to see what people really need. The idea was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at once. Are you serious? Dead serious. I've been miserable for years, even though I couldn't admit it to myself. I have everything I thought I wanted, but I don't have anything that matters. Working with you, helping continue Dad's legacy, maybe that's what I need to find my way back to who I used to be. Over the next hour, we talked through the practical details of what Vanessa was proposing. She would pay off the second mortgage, allowing me to keep the house without the crushing debt. We would establish a foundation using part of Dad's investment accounts and some of Vanessa's own money. I would continue teaching, but would also oversee the foundation's day-to-day operations, identifying families and students who needed help. Vanessa would handle the legal and financial aspects, while also taking a more active role in actually working with the people we helped. There's one more thing, Vanessa said as we sat at the kitchen table, sketching out our plans on the back of an envelope. I want to move back to this neighborhood. What? Richard and we've been having problems for a while. The house in Cherry Creek, the fancy car, all of it. It doesn't feel like my life anymore. I want to find a smaller place around here, somewhere I can walk to your house, somewhere that feels like home instead of a showpiece. I reached across the table and took her hand. Are you sure? That's a big change. It's the right change. Dad was right about me. I did forget who I was supposed to be, but it's not too late to remember, is it? No, I said firmly. It's never too late. The next few months transformed both of our lives in ways I never could have imagined. Vanessa filed for divorce from Richard, a process that was complicated but ultimately amicable. She sold the Cherry Creek house and bought a modest craftsman bungalow 6 blocks from Dad's house. She also made changes at her law firm, shifting her focus from corporate law to family law and pro bono work. Meanwhile, I moved into the family home and slowly began making it my own while preserving the memories it held. I kept Mom's garden tools and planted new herbs in the spring. I left Dad's favorite chair in the living room and bought a reading lamp so I could sit there in the evenings, just like he used to do. The Martinez Family Foundation officially launched in September, on what would have been Dad's 69th birthday. Our first recipients were the families Dad had been helping secretly, ensuring that his support would continue. But we also expanded beyond his original list, working with counselors at local schools to identify students who needed help with college expenses, families struggling with medical bills, and single parents trying to balance work and education. One afternoon in early October, I was in the foundation's small office, which we had set up in Dad's old den, when Vanessa knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you," she said, stepping aside to reveal a young woman in her early 20s, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. "Hi," the woman said. "I'm Jennifer Walsh. I wanted to thank you for continuing what your father started." I stood up quickly, recognizing the name from the canceled checks we had found. "Jennifer, please come in. How are you doing? How's your son?" "Better," she said, sitting down in the chair across from my desk. "The treatments are working, and Marcus is doing well in college. He's studying to be a teacher, actually. He says your dad inspired him to want to help kids the way he was helped." Tears filled my eyes. This was exactly what Dad would have wanted to hear. "But that's not really why I'm here," Jennifer continued. "I wanted to ask if there's anything I can do to help with the foundation. I know I don't have money to donate, but I have time, and I have experience with what it's like to need help." Vanessa and I looked at each other, and I could see the same thought in both of our minds. Dad had believed in the power of people helping people, in the importance of giving everyone a chance to contribute something meaningful. "We would love to have your help," I said. "In fact, we've been talking about setting up a mentorship program, pairing people who have received help with others who are just starting to navigate difficult situations." "That sounds perfect," Jennifer said. "Your father saved my life and my son's future. I want to be part of passing that gift along to other families." As Jennifer left that day, promising to return the following week to start training as a volunteer mentor, I felt a sense of completeness that I hadn't experienced since Dad's death. This was what he had envisioned when he wrote those final letters. Not just the money or the house or the individual gestures of support, but the creation of a community of people who cared for each other, who understood that we all need help sometimes, and that we all have something to offer in return. That evening, Vanessa and I sat on the front porch of Dad's house, watching the sunset and talking about the day's events. It had become our routine, these end-of-day conversations that helped us process everything we were learning about ourselves and each other. "Do you think Dad knew?" Vanessa asked. "Do you think he knew that hiding parts of your letter would force us to have that confrontation at the will reading?" I considered the question. "I think Dad knew us better than we knew ourselves. He knew I would forgive you, but he also knew you needed to understand what forgiveness really costs. He knew you were capable of change, but he also knew you needed a reason to want to change. He was a smart man," Vanessa said with a sad smile. "Smarter than either of us gave him credit for. He was, and he loved us enough to plan for this moment, even knowing he wouldn't be here to see it." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood coming to life around us. Children playing in yards, families having dinner, the ordinary rhythms of life that Dad had cherished and protected. "Rebecca," Vanessa said eventually, "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I love you. I love you, and I'm proud of you, and I'm grateful that you gave me a second chance to be your sister." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "I love you too, and I'm proud of who you're becoming." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I thought about Dad's final letter and his belief that love is not something that must be earned, but something that is freely given. He had loved us both enough to see our flaws clearly and still believe in our capacity to grow and change. He had loved us enough to orchestrate this reconciliation from beyond the grave, using his final words to guide us back to each other. The Martinez Family Foundation continued to grow over the following years, helping hundreds of families and students throughout the Denver area. Vanessa thrived in her new role, discovering that using her legal skills to help people rather than corporations brought her a satisfaction she had never experienced in her previous career. I found that running the foundation alongside my teaching allowed me to have a broader impact while still working directly with young people. But perhaps the most important thing Dad's final letters accomplished was the healing of our sisterhood. We learned to talk to each other honestly, to ask for help when we needed it, and to offer support without being asked. We created new traditions while honoring old ones, and we built a relationship based on understanding and acceptance rather than competition and judgment. 5 years after Dad's death, on a warm spring evening, Vanessa and I were planting tomatoes in Mom's old garden when she suddenly stopped digging and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing's wrong," she said. "I was just thinking about that day in Mr. Westbrook's office when you read Dad's letter out loud. I was so angry and scared and defensive. I thought my life was falling apart. And now? Now I know it was actually falling together. For the first time in my adult life, I feel like I know who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing. I feel like I'm finally the person Dad and Mom raised me to be." As we finished planting the garden that evening, working side by side in the soil that had nurtured our family for decades, I realized that Dad's final gift to us hadn't been the house or the money or even the foundation. His final gift had been the truth about who we were, who we could become, and how much we meant to each other. My sister had hidden the last letter Dad wrote me, but in doing so, she had unknowingly set in motion the exact chain of events Dad had hoped for. His words, read aloud at the will reading, had forced us to confront our problems and find our way back to each other. And in the end, that reconciliation had been worth more than any inheritance he could have left us. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most difficult packages. Sometimes love looks like hard truths and uncomfortable confrontations. And sometimes the people who hurt us the most are also the ones who need our forgiveness the most. Dad understood all of this when he wrote those final letters. He knew that healing our family would require honesty vulnerability, and the courage to change. He knew that love is not always easy, but it is always worth fighting for. Today, when people ask me about the Martinez Family Foundation and how it came to be, I tell them it started with a hidden letter and a sister's moment of weakness. But it grew into something beautiful because of a father's wisdom and two sisters' willingness to choose love over pride, forgiveness over resentment, and hope over fear. That's the real story of my father's final letters. Not just what he wrote, but what we chose to do with his words once we finally heard them. And every day, as Vanessa and I continue the work he started and live out the values he taught us, we honor his memory and prove that his faith in us was justified. The bond between sisters is sacred, he had written. Do not let pride or hurt feelings destroy what your mother and I tried to build in our family. Love each other fiercely, forgive each other completely, and remember that you are both part of me, carrying forward the best of what I tried to be. We remembered, Dad. We remembered and we kept our promise.